Are you guys ready to do this? Let's go. Hey guys, welcome to Amity Tracks. We are getting into the Neil Young, the nitty gritty here of Neil Young, the ranking of his studio albums. So if you missed the first episode of this Neil Young series that we're in the midst of, I recommend going back and watching that. In that episode, I started off giving a review of his newly released archive album, Chrome Dreams. I kind of dig into that a bit and sort of introduce this entire series here. But in this episode and the next, we are ranking his 43 studio albums. Now, some people come up with different numbers. How did I come up with 43? I am not including the now 4 kind of lost albums that have been released through the archives. We're doing a separate archives episode where we unravel that labyrinth, and I think it'll be a very interesting episode actually. And I do want to address those records because they're very important records actually, including Chrome Dreams. But I'm not including those, and I am including one live album, which makes sense. Time Fades Away, because yes, it's live, but it's all new material at the time. He's basically introducing new songs, just like he would do on a studio album. Just happens to be in front of an audience, so it really serves the purpose of an album. So I'm including Time Fades Away. So with that, I came up with the number 43. Now we're gonna do the heavy lifting in this episode. I'm going 43 to 16. And then in the next episode, we'll give you the top 15. So do with that what you will. But that's the way it's going to go. Now, if you're a vinyl person, I do have a lot of CDs in this. We're going to get to some vinyl in this episode. I got a lot of CDs. One, a lot of his more recent stuff hasn't been released or is very hard to find on vinyl. And two, as you'll see, even though Neil Young is my favorite artist, I don't love all of his albums. I think you find very few, even diehard Neil fans like myself, who love everything. The guy puts something out every 2 days, right? So it's hard to love everything. And so some of these things I have on CD, especially the ones I don't really like that much, I'm not going to go spend the money on vinyl to get it, even if I could find it. So anyway, that's kind of the groundwork. So let's go ahead and get started. We got a lot to cover. I'm going to try and move pretty quickly. I want to give you at least something interesting to say on every one of these records, but I'm going to try not to dwell on any of them. We want to keep this, keep the video to a watchable length. All right. Number 43. What do you think I think is the worst Neil Young album ever? Any guesses? Well, it is 2014's Story Tone. Yeah, I obviously I don't like this record. Now, this is an album he put together with an orchestra. He'd always wanted to record a whole album with kind of a full orchestra. So a lot of these songs are with an orchestra. A lot of the songs are with kind of a big band. He wanted to go kind of big. Now, typical of Neil lately, he can't really decide which version of an album he likes, so he just puts multiple versions out, which makes it even more frustrating. There's this, and then he put out a second disc of just kind of stripped down acoustic versions, basically kind of like the demos. Then he released one that mixed the two. Whatever. Whatever version you use, I don't think it's very good. Now, he was writing these songs when his burgeoning romance with Daryl Hannah, the mermaid, right? Uh, the actress. And so a lot of these songs kind of, address that. I'm glad I found you, all of these things. I just don't, and this is the case with a lot of these records in the last 20 years or so. I don't think he spent a ton of time really crafting these songs. They feel kind of tossed off. To me, there's nothing that really catches. in the mind after you finish listening to it. Um, I guess if I had to pick a track, when I watch you sleeping is kind of the nicest one, but whatever. Yeah. So Story Tone, my least favorite Neil Young album. You know what? What album? Um, I also don't like. That would be 2015's The Monsanto Years. Actually goes like this. So, a couple things on this. One, this is typical of some of his more, when I say the last 20 years, a lot of his albums in the last 20 years or so. He will get fixated on like one issue. And instead of maybe in the old days of writing a song about it, he tosses off a whole album about that issue. On this one, he is obsessed with the agri-giant Monsanto and Frankenfoods and all of that and pesticides, all that stuff. So he puts out a whole damn album, addressing, attacking Monsanto, right? Um, yeah, and a rock star bucks a coffee shop. I guess maybe not every song is about Monsanto, but most of it is. And it's a shame because his backing band on this album is Promise of the Real, which he has used in recent years on several albums. Promise of the Real is a very good band, led by Lucas Nelson, who is the son of Willie Nelson. And they're a great band. I just don't think Neil has really done them a real great service with some of the albums he has them playing on, because again, these are in some ways kind of very myopic albums on topically, and just yeah, kind of half-baked songs. All right, you know what else I don't like is number 41, going back to 2003 with Greendale. 2003's Greendale. This was a rock opera. Now this is with Crazy Horse. This was a rock opera about kind of this Northern California seaside town, and it tackles some of Neil's favorite topics, environmental issues, the effects of mass media, all that kind of thing. I just don't think it's very interesting. There are 3 songs on here that go, they're over the 10-minute mark, and they're very heavy on exposition and narrative, and the story is just not interesting enough, and the songs aren't, again, you know a riff does not make a song. He'll come up with some kind of half-baked riff, and then it becomes a whole song, and in more recent years at least. Yeah, it's funny. Editor and I have an old friend who we've kind of lost touch with, but Todd, if you're out there. And I remember this vividly. Todd went and saw Neil Young on this tour, not knowing, this is very Neil, that Neil was basically just basically playing this whole album all the way through, and maybe throwing a few songs there at the end. And actually had actors on the stage like playing it out, and he said it was terrible, and he was so furious when he was telling me about the show. Right. Anyway, Greendale. There was one song on here which I think is stunningly great, and that's Bandit. Bandit, I think, is a gorgeous song. All right. What's next, my friends? Let's see. That was 41. So now we go 40. Here's another one where he got fixated on one issue. This is 2006's Living with War. Now, on this one, he got furious about our war in Iraq. And so, in what sounds like took him maybe an hour, he tossed off this whole album. I mean, to me, these are very kind of undercooked songs, and just very, of the moment. I'll almost stale, the next month or so after. I don't know. Yeah, so I just don't like this very much. There's a couple tunes on here that are all right. What did I say? I liked, Families, Roger and Al are all right. But he has such unsubtle protest songs like "Let's Impeach the President," "Looking for a Leader," "Shock and Awe." Anyway, there's some people that thought this was kind of brave and interesting. I didn't. Number 39, we got one that was almost forgotten, pretty much immediately when it was released. It's another one of these. It's from 2017 that he does with Promise of the Real. It's called "The Visitor." Anyone remember this? Probably don't, do you? Yeah, again, it's just kind of underbaked and forgettable. "Carnival," I think, was sort of interesting song. He kind of has a kind of a weak attempt to take on Donald Trump. A song called "Already Great," addressing the "Make America Great Again." Right? I don't know. It's just almost forgotten. Like day after it came out. It's just not a lot memorable on there. Did I mention Neil Young's my favorite artist? I promise you, I'm going to start praising stuff at some point soon. We got to get through this bottom part of the list first. Speaking of bad, 38. This is an album that when I've looked at other rankings, a lot of times this is at the bottom. At least I don't have it at the bottom. But it's 2002's "Are You Passionate?" Now, it's another like lost opportunity because the band he has backing him on this is Booker T and the MGs. And actually, I saw two shows on this tour, and they were fantastic shows because he went on tour with Booker T and the MGs, and they were his band on that tour. They were awesome, great shows. But this album is not great. He does try and maybe get a little bit into that kind of soul sound, but again, it's mainly the issue is sort of these underbaked songs. I guess the title track would probably be my favorite. That one's all right. There's a kind of a cringy attempt to take on 9/11 and talk about the heroics on United 93 with the song "Let's Roll," but a shadow of what say something like Ohio was, right? Kind of perversely, of course, and Neil does this a lot. He had recorded a much better record right before this, and then he yanked it at the last minute and put this out. That would be "Toast," which is one of these archives releases, but we'll talk about that with our archives episode. That was 38. 37. Let's go to 2005 with "Prairie Wind." Now, this one, I don't know, it's kind of in the vein of, say, "Comes a Time" or maybe, "Harvest Moon." It's pretty polished, kind of a country feel, which is cool. I mean, it sounds like he was actually taking some time on some of these songs, which is something. I still don't really like the songs all that much. All right. What's next? 36. 36 is kind of funny. Again, the last previous episode, we just reviewed the new Chrome Dreams. But back in 2007, he released Chrome Dreams 2. It's kind of a joke, obviously, because in 2007, Chrome Dreams had not been officially released, although it was bootlegged a lot. So a lot of people, including me, had it, but wasn't officially released. And Neil thought it would be funny to name an album Chrome Dreams 2 when there was no official Chrome Dreams. But this is an interesting album. This is just sort of a collection of leftovers, just got some different songs that, for whatever reason, had never made other albums. And he kind of puts some stuff together here. And with Neil, that can be some gems because so many gems are in the vaults as the archives releases show. This one, though, I didn't find too much interesting. It does have the legendary 18-minute "Ordinary People" from the late 80s, from the Blue Notes era. Now, I've heard live versions of that are pretty strong. This studio version, I think, kind of drags a bit. I don't know. I like Boxcar. I think Boxcar is kind of cool. All right. What's next? 35. 35. I know I own it. I own everything of Neil's. I can't find the damn thing, so editor can throw it up there. But it's 2016's "Peace Trail." It's not a real exciting album art anyway. This is another one that sort of came and went without much fanfare. It's kind of interesting. There's one song on there called "My Pledge," which a lot of people hate. I actually is my favorite song on there. I think it's kind of interesting. He uses auto tune, like kind of overuses it on purpose to make this really kind of interesting vocal sound. I think it's kind of cool, actually. I think it's the most memorable song on there. Anyway, all right, 34. Now here we're finally getting into some albums that I kind of like. Okay, with 34. 34 is a real interesting story. It's 2014's A Letter Home. There's Neil right there. 2014's A Letter Home. So it's an album of covers, and Neil went to Nashville to Jack White's studio in Nashville. And in his studio, Jack White had this vintage 1947 voiceograph vinyl booth. You can kind of see the booth there. There's Neil in the booth recording. And what this was, these were used a lot of times back in the day. People would go in there and could record something on vinyl, and a lot of times it wasn't even music. It was just like maybe a message to your mom or something. This is the 40s, and so before a lot of you could really get it on anything else. But Neil went in the booth with a guitar and a harmonica and just did some covers, and it's kind of cool sounding because it's vintage sounding. It sounds like an old scratchy 78, which is what they would have been. Would they have been 78s? I don't know. Anyway, um, so that's kind of interesting. There's some good stuff on here. He does two Gordon Lightfoot songs, which are very good. He does Needle of Death, which is another really good song. Yeah, Girl from the North Country, one of my very favorite Bob Dylan songs that everyone has covered, but I love that song. Now, I do wish maybe he had made some other interesting choices. Like he covers Willie Nelson and he covers Bruce Springsteen. But, for Willie Nelson, he picks On the Road Again, which is kind of not real exciting. And then My Hometown by Springsteen, which is one of my least favorite Bruce songs. So I wasn't real excited that that's the Springsteen song he did. There's so many great Springsteen songs he could have done. So yeah, I don't know. It's a kind of a novelty, yeah, but it's interesting and it's kind of cool. Kind of a cool experiment. All righty, moving right along. Number 33. With number 33, I'm going to a very recent one, 2021's Barn, because it was recorded in this barn on Neil Young's property in Colorado. So his most recent three records, this kind of trilogy of albums, at least of new material, are with kind of this new version of Crazy Horse. So Frank Sampedro, longtime guitarist with Crazy Horse, basically retired, kind of stopped playing music. Um, Ralph Molina and Billy Talbot, the rhythm section are still there, but Nils Lofgren has come in as the fourth musician. Nils Lofgren, of course, most famous for being in Springsteen's E Street Band, but Nils has a kind of a long history with Neil Young. Played on Tonight's the Night, and has played with Neil before. I was real excited when I heard about this because Frank Sampedro is great, but Nils Lofgren is a much more kind of he can bring a lot more to the table, I think, than Frank Sampedro could. A lot of kind of diversity. He can play more instruments, and you do hear that in this sort of new Crazy Horse. It's a little more variety and sound. But again, I think the weakness is some of the songwriting isn't all that strong. So Barn is my least favorite of this kind of most recent trilogy. Coming in at number 32 is the one right before that, the first one in this new Crazy Horse trilogy, which is Colorado. Right? I think this is a little bit stronger than Barn, but yeah, that's all I got to say about that. All right, so 31. Here we go. Getting into some 80s Neil. I am a huge fan. I really like 80s Neil. I find it pretty fascinating. A lot of people don't. um, give you a little bit of background real quick here, and then I don't have to repeat it on these other 80s albums because we're getting into kind of a batch of 80s here. Neil Young switched to Geffen Records in the 1980s. And he immediately started doing these really strange kind of genre exercises and like drastically changing course every album. And it was blowing people's minds, Neil's fans, because they weren't traditional Neil sounding albums. David Geffen and Geffen Records got so pissed at him, they sued him. They sued him for making records not characteristic of Neil Young. So basically, they sued Neil Young for not making Neil Young records. Okay, and so I find his '80s period kind of fascinating. I wouldn't mind doing a deep dive video just in that. But here's the first one from the '80s that reaches our list, 1987's, and here's some vinyl. Life with Crazy Horse. Now, on some lists, this is right at the bottom or near the bottom. Obviously, there's many other albums I like less than this. I kind of have a soft spot for Life. One, I've had it forever. Two, I think I don't know. I really like Mideast Vacation. That is, you know, it's so '80s. It's such this time capsule. I mean, he mentions Gaddafi and Rambo, and it's a weird, fun song. I've always loved Mideast Vacation. Long Walk Home, I think, is underrated. Inca Queen is interesting. When Your Lonely Heart Breaks is actually pretty nice. Underrated record. Am I saying it's amazing or great? No. I don't think it's as bad as its reputation. All right. Number 30 is fun to talk about. I told you about Geffen suing Neil Young. They basically wanted him to make a rock and roll record. And so Neil did. With this one, 1983, he gave him Everybody's Rockin', which is a total like FU to Geffen. He's like, you want rock? I'll give you a rock and roll record. This is like Neil doing like this kind of tossed off rockabilly songs, and it's just, honestly, I like it more for what it is and the idea of it than actually putting it on and listening to it. I don't listen to it that much. It's pretty funny. It's just like here you go. The first song, Betty Lou's got a new pair of shoes. He's just like doing this like '50s, just rockabilly stuff. Now he does a cool version of Mystery Train on there, and it is notable because it does include the song "Wonderin'," which is the first official release of that song. That song dates back to the late '60s. I've heard versions of that song. We'll talk about it with the archives. I'm actually a big fan of this Everybody's Rockin' version of Wonderin'. I think it's really cool on here. I actually genuinely really like that song on here. All right. Number 29. This record made Geffen angry. I have 1985's Old Ways. You might look at this and say, oh, it's another Harvest or something. No, this is like a straight old school country record. He wanted to do country music. And he did with Old Ways. It's got Willie Nelson as a guest on there. Waylon Jennings is on there. Bela Fleck is on there. And it's just like a straight up country record. Although I love the song Misfits. That is a really weird, strange, creepy song. Misfits is kind of cool. All right. What do we got after this? So 28, moving right along here with 1980's Hawks and Doves. Hawks and Doves, which is an interesting record. Now this one came right on the heels of his amazing '70s run. This is in 1980, and it's sort of a cleanup job. It's about half of its new songs and half of its kind of older tracks that he had recorded in the '70s that had never made it onto some of those records. And so it's sort of a hodgepodge. And it's all right. What is it, the Old Homestead? I think the Old Home. I think that's what it is. I think that one's kind of interesting. Anyway, there you go. All right, coming back to more recent times, 27 and 26 are kind of companion pieces. They were recorded in the same sessions. I have them reversed in the order that most people would have them. Most people would have this one that I have at 26 at 25, or no, I have at 27. They would have it ahead of what I have at 26 anyway. But at 27, I have Psychedelic Pill. Double album with Crazy Horse. This album has a lot of fans. I mean, a lot of people really like this album. It's kind of retro Neil in some ways. Psychedelic Pill, right? Is long. I'm gonna be honest with you. I hardly ever really put it on. I don't love it. Uh, and it's again kind of where Neil, will play a riff over and over and just kind of do this jam. Like the opening track is 28 minutes, drifting back. Yeah, but there's some good stuff on there. Walk Like a Giant, I think rocks. That's pretty cool. I like the title track. The title track is concise, like 3 minute tune, very kind of reminiscent of Cinnamon Girl in some ways. So there's some good stuff on here. Now at 26, I have its companion piece, Americana, which again was recorded in the same sessions. The story is, uh, when Crazy Horse got back together, they hadn't been together in a while, and so he kind of wanted to warm up. And these are kind of the warm up sessions before this, and where they kind of jammed on these old like traditional folk songs and stuff, but like Crazy Horse style, rocking out on them. I think it's an interesting concept, and I think it kind of works. Like Oh Susanna and Clementine and Gallows Pole, and I really like High Flying Bird, and actually I really like Oh Susanna too. Yeah, I think I'm in the minority because a lot of people don't really like this very much, but I actually like this better than this. All right, moving along here at number 25, we're going into the 90s during his huge resurgence in the 90s. In 1995, so he was kind of this hero to the grunge movement. I mean, you probably know, Kurt Cobain's suicide note quoted a Neil Young song, right? My hey hey. And Neil Young was very good friends with Pearl Jam, and so 1995, Pearl Jam was his backing band on Mirrorball. Now, I think it's good. I do think some of these songs are kind of half baked. Again, but some of them have stood the test of time. I Am the Ocean, I think is good. But yeah, it's cool. It's cool. And Pearl Jam does sort of give it this jolt of energy. All right, number 24 is the third of this recent trilogy, his most recent album of new material, last year's World Record. And there he is with his mother. But yeah, World Record. Now, you go back, we did a review of this. So if you want to kind of dive into what I think of this, go check out that review. I think it's really good, actually. I was pleasantly surprised. Chevrolet is great. It's 15-minute, just great jam. Crazy Horse is awesome. Okay, moving right along here. At number 23, we have one of his genre exercises, or not genre exercises, one of his sort of like focused on one issue albums, but for some reason I really like it. It's 2009's Fork in the Road. And on this record, Neil is obsessed with his Lincoln Continental that he has turned in to this car that runs on alternative fuels. Neil is obsessed with alternative fuels, the Link Volt project, and he decided to write a whole record on it. For some reason, I just find a lot of these songs kind of catchy, and I like them. And I love the album cover too. It's like your crazy Uncle Neil is here, and he's gonna like talk to you to death about his new Link Volt car. And I don't know, I just like it. Okay, moving on. Let's see, number 20. That was 23. So number 22, I have 1996 Broken Arrow, which was with Crazy Horse. This was sort of the ending of that kind of 90s run, that 90s resurgence. Yeah, I think it's pretty good. There's some real kind of sleepers on here. Real nice, like Scattered. I think Scattered is a great song. Slip Away is really nice as well. All right. At number 21, we have 2000's Silver and Gold. Silver and Gold. Another one of these records where some of these songs are new, but some of them kind of old songs that hadn't made it on old records. He kind of puts it together here. This is a largely acoustic record. Sounds kind of like Harvest Moon, a bit, I guess, in tone. This might be one for you guys to go kind of revisit. I really like this record. It's got some Buffalo Springfield again. It's a real nice look back at his early band. It's real nostalgic. It's a great song. Good to See You is nice. Great Divide is beautiful. Razor Love is gorgeous, especially when he did that live. It's beautiful. I saw him on this tour also. Without Rings is a great deep cut. I I think this is underappreciated. Pretty great. All right, number 20, 1981 with Crazy Horse, Reactor. This is probably his most like just driving heavy rock record. I mean, it's brutal. It's got such songs like Surfer Joe and Mow the Sleaze. The stunning shots. Shots, I think, is a pretty amazing song. Southern Pacific is fun. And it's even got the 9-minute T-Bone, which for 9 minutes, the only lyric in the song over and over is got mashed potatoes, ain't got no T-bone. For 9 minutes, yet it kind of works. This has gathered kind of a cult following in more recent years. A lot of people really kind of dig this record. I do, obviously. I mean, I got it all the way up here at 20. All right, we got 4 more. Stay with me. We're almost there. For this particular episode, at number 19, 1988's This Note's for You. Another one of his genre exercises where Neil now wants to play blues, and he gets a big horn section and plays big band blues. I actually think this is pretty good. I enjoy some of it. There's some kind of real nice moody songs on there like Coupe de Ville and Twilight. Um, the title track is awesome. One of his best songs of the '80s. Love that song. Very, a lot of you guys probably know this story, but the video was banned on MTV because This Note's for You. It's all about artists selling out to commercialism, right? So, it kind of makes fun of artists doing ads for Coke and Bud and Bud Light and all whatever, and, Miller Lite and all that. And so MTV banned the video, and then it won Video of the Year at the MTV Awards. But it's a cool song. I've always loved that song. It's great. Got a great story along with that tour, but I'll save that for. I'm gonna do a countdown of my best concerts I've ever seen, and we'll talk about that. Okay, number 18. This is one that often falls at the bottom of people's lists. I kind of like it. It's 1986. Landing on Water. Yeah, this has a reputation of being terrible. I think it's really interesting, like way '80s, but I think it's got an edge to it. It's kind of cool. I love the song "Hippie Dream." It's a brutal, biting song, kind of with Neil basically taking on some of his friends, like David Crosby, who are kind of in bad shape and have, I don't know, kind of stuck in the past and all that. It's a nasty little song called Hippie Dream, but it rocks. I think it's really great. It's a cool song. All right, number 17, going to the 90s again. I've got 1994's Sleeps with Angels. This has really gathered a following. It's interesting. I've watched other videos of people talking Neil. A lot of people really like this record. I obviously do. I've got it at 17 out of 43. And, I love Neil. So it's good. It's with Crazy Horse. It's really dark. A lot of people think that it was recorded and written in the wake of Kurt Cobain's suicide, but actually most of the songs were recorded prior to that. The title track, I do believe, was written in response to Kurt Cobain's suicide. Like I said, it's got a real dark vibe. I love. It's like 14 minutes long. I love Change Your Mind. I think that's one of the great Crazy Horse, latter day Crazy Horse songs. And a great chorus. It's great. But yeah, I don't love all of it. Piece of Crap is kind of a crappy song, but yeah. But I think other people love this more than I do. But there it is. All right, one last one here. At number 16, I am dipping into the 70s finally. That great, great era in the 70s. I have 1978's Comes a Time, which was a record that I think a lot of people were waiting for. He finally revisits some of the more polished kind of folk rock, country rock that had been on harvest. And people kind of been waiting for another harvest, and this is kind of the closest he got in the '70s. I mean, it's beautifully produced. It's it doesn't take nearly near the chances that his great records in the '70s do. But yeah, I love the title track. Although I'm a much bigger fan of the live version on Live Rust. Look Out for My Love is great. It's got Human Highway on there, the supposed title track of the many times aborted CSNY album. Yeah, a lot of love actually. Kind of this almost like a pop song, very rare for Neil Young. Became a hit for who was it, Nicolette Larson, I believe. But his version is on here. Yeah, it's a beautiful kind of country rock, folk rock record, singer songwriter type of thing. It's just not as daring as a lot of his other '70s stuff. Well, all right, guys, if you stuck with me, awesome. The next video is the payoff. We've got numbers 15, the top 15 Neil Young albums, according to me. And I've spent a lot of my life listening to Neil Young. So, all right. So I hope to see you guys next time on the top 15 Neil Young albums. And after that, we'll get into the archives and all that. So, more Neil to come. Please do subscribe to the channel, hit the bell for notifications, like the videos, all that stuff, and we'll see you later.